welcome to London Buddhist Centre. Especially welcome if it's your first time here at the Buddhist Centre. Very good to see you. My name's Singhamanas. I'm one of the teachers here at the centre, and going to spend the next. Hi, Rael, come in. Going to spend the best part of this hour looking at Buddhist perspective, attitudes on wanting or desire, key issue for all of us. So I'll do some talking, and we'll also make sure that there's some time for questions. I want to keep it a little bit informal, not a lecture. And then, like I say, if there's time, I might do a little exercise. So I want to start with a little story which came to mind when they asked me to talk about desire, or what do we want. The story came to mind of a friend of mine a couple of years ago, a good friend. He was working working in a city up north on a job, and he's a shop fitter. The job got delayed by some days, so he was held up in a fairly ugly plain travel lodge for several days, and got increasingly bored while there was the delay to him fitting this shop, which was a job he needed to do in a northern city, which I won't name, but needless to say, it was a fairly grim place. And he was sort of stuck on the outside of town. Anyway, after a couple of days, he was just about to call a prostitute. Yeah, it was just about something he'd done quite a lot of in his life. He was just about to get in touch with a prostitute and do that. But he'd started practicing Buddhism by this point, and he was feeling increasingly uneasy about doing that. He's feeling increasingly uneasy about patronising that kind of economy, and wasn't really sure how it fitted in with his Buddhist practice, I guess, his practice of ethics and mindfulness. So he's found himself in a bit of a bind, not knowing what to do. Intense frustration, restlessness, boredom, irritation with his situation. Anyway, in slight desperation, he went into town and found his way to the local gallery, a little art gallery that this town had. He's not an art lover, this guy. He's a fairly sort of he's a lovely man, but not particularly into paintings and that. Anyway, but he thought, I'm just going to go to the gallery. So he went to the gallery, found his way into the gallery, and he said he sat down in one of the central rooms, and something about the atmosphere of the place, the hush, the paintings, the people quietly milling around, and of course the paintings on the wall, their beauty. He just said he broke down in tears, and suddenly everything was all right again. The experience had a real impact on his life. He sort of kicked that particular habit and moved on to better things. So I remember when he told me this story, I was really struck with the simplicity and the intensity of the story. And I think in there, it came to mind when I was thinking about this talk and thinking about issues of desire particularly. And I think there's quite a lot in the story which illustrates the point, or illustrates some of the things that the Buddha was trying to get us human beings to look at when we look at our own minds and our own desires. So the first thing that struck me about the story was the pain that's involved with desire. Of course, there's the pain that comes with frustrated desire, even trying to get our desires fulfilled, how we go about meeting our desires. There's a pain that comes with when our desires are filled, the knowledge how to keep them there. And when I say pain, I don't mean like I'm talking about subtle or not so subtle mental pain. Yeah, I'm talking about that kind of pain. I'm not talking about like ouch in the leg, although sometimes it can be like that as well. So the pain that's involved in finding our desires, maintaining them, and then of course the big pains that come when they are dashed and we don't get what we want. So that's the first kind of level of pain involved with desire that the Buddha was particularly keen to emphasize and point out. One of the Buddha's first and principal teachings that he gave, and that was continually reiterating throughout his life, was a teaching of the truths, 4 noble truths in particular. And the first of his truths was the truth of this kind of pain. The word he used was a word called a Buddhist word, dukkha, which actually is a metaphor meaning something like ill-fitting, like an ill-fitting hub or an axle. So it includes the kind of sufferings we read about in the news, but it also includes the kind of sufferings that we have even when we're with the object of our source of happiness, the object of our desire, with a loved one, with our children, with a beautiful scenery, and we sort of don't want to lose it. Those kind of pains as well. It includes those kind of pains. So the Buddha really saw this particular kind of pain. He described it as a thorn in man's heart, and said, "This is really important. This is the first truth I want to look at." And he didn't say He didn't say life is suffering, life is pain. Sometimes people get a bit confused about that. He just said there is this truth of pain. There is this truth of dukkha. And then the second truth related immediately to this, which was the truth of thirsting for things. The word he used, actually, the second truth is the word trishna, which means thirst, and you can render it as desire. So this was the second truth. He said, it's because of this deep desire in men and women that we cause ourselves such a lot of pain. So with my friend's example, for instance, he finds himself in this travel lodge. He's a very physical man, yeah, very strong man, very muscular, and to be sort of just lost, slightly floundering in this ugly place, his desire still churning up, and find himself in intense pain. I mean, I can certainly relate to this myself. Probably most of us can. Trying to find an outlet, something to do with that thirst, that drive, that desire. The second, slightly more subtle level of pain that the Buddha identified with the issue of desiring is the fact that even being in that state, being in a state of subtle or intense craving or desire, is in itself painful. It is in itself painful. Really wanting things, regardless of the fact of whether we're going to get them or not, etc., is in itself a source of unease. It's a source of tension in our minds, in our souls. So that was the first thing that struck me about the story. This issue of desire, the Buddha spent a lot of time talking about this, talking about thirst, the fact that humans thirst. He didn't offer much. Buddha didn't offer much metaphysical explanation. He had a famous sort of metaphysical reticence. He wasn't so much interested in talking about the why or the sort of the metaphysical origin of all these things and why it all happens. He was really concentrated on what is important to focus on, getting to the heart of the issue. What's important to look at. So he didn't. So for instance, with his teaching on desire, people sort of say, where does it come from? What does it mean? Why is it the case? And he didn't go into that. He just said it is there. He even said it is beyond us. This deep desire, this deep thirsting, is man's condition. And if anything, he sort of gave the indication that it almost is out of this deep desire. And I'm talking about at its giddy heights or depths, the desire that even brings existence about in the first place. Not just the conscious, I fancy an almond croissant and a coffee, but the deep desire that's thirsting for existence itself, thirsting for life. The Buddha said we can't really see into the depths. This goes beyond us. It is even out of this deep thirsting that mankind has arisen. So it's a far-reaching thing. One of the things that I find quite interesting about this is, so the Buddha's pointing at like our nature, our deepest nature in the mind is one of desire. It's characterized by desire. Our minds are thirsting. They are hungry all the time for stuff, even the stuff of our minds. Yeah, even our thoughts, all the time. Our mind. If you sit down to meditate for any length of time, you'll notice pretty quickly, I do, and anyway, unless you're far along the path, you'll notice your mind quickly just sort of monkeys around and just gets onto one thing after the next. It's the very nature of the mind. Nothing's gone wrong there, nothing's funny about that. It's just seems to be our very nature. So the Buddha is saying this is fundamental. This is the fundamental characteristic of our minds and what we're doing. Yeah, out of this, other things are heaped up. Other things arise out of this basic fundamental desire. I noticed one of the funny things Buddhism's often talking about is how the mind is so primary. The mind is so primary. Of course, we know that the mind is primary to experience. It doesn't take much thinking to recognize that it's the mind that leads, determines our experience. Yeah. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter where you are, who you're with, what you're doing. Those things are secondary to the fact on the state of your mind. It's the mind that will determine the quality of your experience or how your experience unfolds. So the mind is always, that's one of the reasons why we spend so much time in Buddhism, focusing on the mind itself. That's what we're doing in meditation, is working with the mind. The mind is primary and the mind can change. These are the other fundamental premise, truths, I guess, a Buddhist would hold. So out of our mind comes experience. One of the key experiences that Buddhism's always talking about, and I mentioned the metaphysical reticence. I will stray a little bit into metaphysics, but I'll come back. Is Buddhism's often talking about how our experience is a construction coming out of our minds, coming out of desire. One of the ways we construct our experience is the mind gives rise to our sense of time and our sense of space. And this has been always an aspect of Buddhism. I won't dwell on this too long, don't worry. So I know it's just Sunday morning almost. But I will just mention it because it's quite key to talking about desire. So one of the issues that Buddhism's trying to get us to look at is our sense of separateness, our sense of being alone, our sense of being cut off from people, things, life. Sometimes we feel that strongly. Sometimes we feel more close to life. We feel more close to our friends. Those are the moments that give us an indication of there being something actually more going on. All too often, a lot of our pain is to do with the fact that we feel sort of cut off. Even when we're with people, Sometimes you feel like you just want to be with them fully. You want to be with them more fully. I was at a party last night, and it was a pretty good party, and talking to friends and stuff. But that party feeling, for instance, when everyone's there, like, oh, there's friends from friends from school and friends from work, and it's really nice to be together. But sometimes you feel that there's still a gap. Sometimes you can't quite. You just, I don't know if I feel that quite a lot. And you want to really be together. And every now and again you get a moment where you all really connect, often in laughter or something, yeah. And you feel the bonds the bonds sort of flourish, and that sense of separation, that jolted sense of being apart, breaks down. This is all to do with a space and time sense. The reason why I mention it in connection with desire is because when one has a very strong object of desire, that sense of separateness, that sense of being apart, is really strong, really, really strong. I noticed it. So last month, fell in love with this woman, and I was meditating, on the pain that comes with when you get gripped, when Cupid hits you, and you get struck, pinned even, and you didn't really choose it, but it happens. And when you've got what I noticed was, with a strong object of desire like that, a strong focus, a crude object of desire, you could say, very sort of clear, in this case, her, a very strong sense of time and a very heavy sense of space, i.e. a sense of not being with the object of desire, a sense of distance, the longing, the yearning to want to be with them, and a very strong sense of time as well, a sense of waiting, like when am I going to be able to see them again, when am I, etc. Very strong sense of time and space, really contrasted with other experiences I've had. So earlier this year, for instance, I was on a solitary retreat. So another classic Buddhist practice is to spend time in solitude. Very, very interesting thing to do, spend time in solitary retreat. So I was meditating in our retreat centre in Spain, where we have some huts in the mountains. Beautiful place. And I was alone. And when you're alone in nature like that, your desires can really quell. You can just spend time much more simply, relief from the busyness and stimulus of a city, a great city like London, listening to nature. And one of the things one notices very quickly is that with that reduced input, the desires start to settle, they start to quell. And very quickly I noticed in meditation, some of the meditations that we do in practice here, we teach here, involve meditating on other people, developing loving kindness. And very quickly I started to feel very strangely close to people. Yeah, even though I was miles away in Spain, I felt weirdly close to people I care about, people in my life who I don't necessarily even know, but then people who are very, very close to me, family, close friends. Felt very, very close to them. And then the other thing I noticed is, like, when you go into a retreat like this, your mind starts to open up. The sense of the past and the sense of the future that all starts to loosen up as well. So memories come up. Memories become more fluid. They change. So basically what I'm noticing is, as my mind, in those excellent conditions, that is a retreat, that's what a retreat is, excellent conditions, your mind starts to loosen up, and then you start to notice how things like time and space, which Buddhism is always saying is part of the suffering of the human condition, they start to become much more fluid. Do you see how the people, even though they're literally far away, felt very, very close to me, very close to my heart. My own past, my own future didn't feel so stretched out along some kind of clothesline of experience. All felt much more fluid. Whereas in the city, even then when one can feel very close to people, literally, sometimes one feels painfully separate from them, and painfully waiting for something to happen to alleviate that sort of discomfort, that sort of dukkha. So the other thing that strikes me about, I'll just say couple more things about this story of my friend and the gallery and the prostitute, and then maybe we'll see what you think. The other thing that strikes me is he used his intelligence, he used his mindfulness to respond creatively to the situation. Yeah, so he's got this intense, overwhelming desire, this crude lust for sex in this case, and he thought, no, I don't want to act out of that. I don't want to be like that. I'm going to do something different. And he had this creative response, this creative idea to try something else, get himself to a different environment and see what that would do. In this case, it was the gallery. And so what I notice in this is it's as if we have these desires, and underneath the desires, or maybe within the desires, I'm not sure however you want to look at it, there are deeper needs or deeper desires that one can meet with more creative means. Yeah, more creative. By creative, I mean more skillful, more wholesome, less hurtful to you and other people, more substantial. So I was thinking about this in relation to all desire. I mean, I'm particularly focusing on lust because it's the desire that I have most experience of. But it applies to all desires, whether you want houses, or whether you want babies, or whether you want money, whether you want status, whether you want a certain job, whether you want whether you want not to be at work anymore, whether you want not to be in England anymore, whether you want not to be. These are all wants, these are all desires still, yeah. So often what one can do is look under the desire, as it were, look through the desire. So just staying with this example of lust, for instance, what I noticed my friend did was he found beauty. Yeah, he found beauty in the gallery, both in the atmosphere and in the paintings. So essential, so essential. I'll just add in here that I think it's important to say is, although desire is in a sense the problem, yeah, I mentioned that in a sense of desire leads to pain. We are creatures of desire, yeah. We can't not desire. We can't not desire. You can for a little bit. You can have relief for a little bit, and ultimately, a Buddha, an awakened human being, is someone who has overcome, who has transcended this very deep characteristic of mankind, this deep thirsting. So it can be overcome. But it's not like sometimes people say, oh yeah, I've got I want stuff and that's bad, therefore I just should stop wanting stuff. I mean it's nonsense really, because you can't do that. You can for a little bit, but not really in this life. What so much of Buddhism is trying to get us to do is to look at our desires, look at our nature, and work with that creatively. Yeah? Work with our nature, work with our minds creatively. There's even one famous statement where the Buddha said, it is only by means of Trishna, this deep thirst, that Trishna can be overcome. Yeah? It's only by means of a certain type of desire. that desire can be overcome. And what Buddhism teaches is looking underneath those desires to what one is more truly desiring, what one really wants, what one really wants underneath it. So, for instance, in this example, just coming back to this story of the day, beauty, my friend wants beauty. We want beauty, completely natural, bona fide human desire, a desire for beauty. We need beauty. We need to find beauty. Very, very important. All sorts of ways to find that. Of course, art is a fantastic way. Films, music, you know what I'm talking about. Pictures. Spending time in nature, another classic way. Walking along the canals of London, the parks. Nature has that very quelling, tranquilizing effect, on the mind, which opens things up. Beauty and people, people are beautiful. Behavior can be beautiful. These areas where I find behavior, like sometimes Buddhism does talk about ethics, but it talks more in terms of, rather than doing right or wrong or what's good or bad, it talks more in terms of what's skillful or even what's beautiful. Some beautiful behavior. Some of my Buddhist teachers, who are much more realized, much more advanced than me, one of the things I love about them is the way they behave. They're just so graceful, so beautiful in their behavior. The kindness, the vitality, the spontaneity of their behavior. The word I'm left with most often is that it's just a beautiful thing to do, the way they behave. So beauty, really, really bona fide, really, really key. Other things I've been thinking about, so I'm slightly straying off the example of my friend and his trip to the gallery. Thinking about myself here. Physicality, physicality, being in the body. Well, actually, I guess my friend he's this really hench guy who fits these shops, and it's really hard work. And I think partly one of the reasons why he was stifled and why he was so frustrated was because he wasn't actually getting to work. He was kind of hanging around twiddling his thumbs while there was a delay on the project. But physicality is something that we also really need, something that also moves our desire. By physicality, I mean feeling into our bodies more fully, being a body, realizing that we are creatures. We're not just heads on sticks, or especially at the moment, especially being in London, like I've found since I've moved here, like a lot of my work involves screens, and screens really take you out of your body. You spend all day on screens that really take you out of your body. Really important to find a way to feel into the body. The body, of course, is here and now in a way that the mind rarely is, and the body is what gives us the clues to how we are. So when one can be more in touch with the body, often one feels less split, and often one feels more contented, more whole, more integrated. One of the reasons why we started teaching, we've started a yoga project here at the Buddhist Center. Yearn over here is one of our excellent yoga teachers, and because we've noticed that particularly increasingly more and more, we're sort of so much in our heads, and even out of our heads in our smartphones and tablets, that coming into the body is increasingly a challenge. So physicality, really good means to work with desire as well. Of course, you can see what I'm doing here is I'm looking at the issue of desire, lust, and I'm sort of passing it through a prism and looking at the spectrum of issues that you can do to more creatively meet those desires in a skillful way, in a more creative way. And I'm sure you can do this for other things like status and money. It's just I for one reason or another, I'm not so bothered about this myself. So I decided to talk more from experience. So So what am I like? Beauty, physicality, intimacy. Yeah, intimacy. This is the other classic one that we're yearning for, that we desire. Intimacy. Again, intimacy is about relationships. It's about being close to people. It's about community. Really, really vital. I was talking to a friend of mine in the office, has a long distance relationship, and I'm like, talking a little bit about that. One of the things I notice he does is he texts his partner, yeah, and they just have these little texts every day, the kind of thing I'm talking about with a partner. Just little texts, the kind of intimate moments that you wouldn't tell most people, but you tell your partner. Little things about your day, often little banal things about your day that you need to tell them. These are kind of that little moments of intimacy that we also need, that we're also looking at. Of course, we get it from family, people we're living together, but sadly, we really don't get that enough. Again, living in the big cities, that sense of community, that sense of passing the time of day a little bit, really special actually. I mean, sometimes it can seem trivial, banal, the weather, how's things, how's so-and-so. It can seem a bit banal, but actually it's really, really important, really, really important. Really important to feel part of a community, to feel part of the rhythm of society, rhythm of the city. So I think intimacy is something that you can also be more creative in finding ways to meet that. My friend Ruta here is fantastic. She brings sort of, she can bring romance into friendships sometimes. So, for instance, one of my friends was working with Ruta last week, and Ruta just sent her a little card saying how much I enjoyed our evening together working on. They were actually building a big shrine, a big installation here, and she sent her a little card saying, I really enjoyed that evening together, something like this. Thanks so much. And my friend who I saw was just really, really touched. The kind of thing you might do with a partner or romantic other, but just lovely to have that in friendships, that sense of just being kind of intimate, and something about cards and little things like that, isn't it? Which makes them very, very intimate, very close. So things like that. And the final ray from the spectrum of desires underneath the desire for lust and romance, particularly, is desire for adventure. This is the other one I thought. Desire for adventure. Again, speaking from experience, and I hope some of you can relate at least, one of the things that's so enticing about falling in love and finding people is adventure, right? It's the adventure, it's the spontaneity, it's the risk, it's the nerves, it's the canniness one has to use, to meet people and fall for each other. A sense of adventure. I think that's a deeper, another healthy desire in men and women, which often gets stuck onto romance, or limited to romance. Tricky one, adventure. I was trying to think of other areas in which one could be more creatively respond to adventure. Haven't got very far with that, actually. Haven't got very far with that yet. I've just been thinking about it this week. Not easy to find a sense of adventure. A friend of mine said maybe we should go night kayaking down the Thames. I was sort of like, yeah, sort of. But it's still kind of not quite the same, is it? Not quite the same, because it's sort of planned and arranged, and you kind of know what's going to happen. So sense of adventure was another one I was looking at. But you see what I mean? What I'm trying to do is, what I'm saying is that we have these very common classic desires which go bam onto this thing, and actually what you can do is work more creatively with the desires. Yeah, you can look into the desires. What am I actually looking for in this? And you can meet it. You can broaden one's life meet it in more creative ways, more skillful ways. It's never quite the same. Yeah, it's never quite the same. I'm not talking about completely resolving it. I'm just talking about broadening one's mind, broadening one's desires, broadening one's life in a sense. Okay, so the final thing I'll just say before wrapping up this part is just as what the Buddha was saying about this desire, this deep desire that characterizes men and women, is sort of infinite in its origins, presupposes us, is a basis for our being, rather than something we've particularly done. It's just our nature. In its appetite, it's infinite. This is the other thing he said. It is insatiable. This thirst we have is insatiable. And really, it seems to be a thirst, a desire for the infinite. In the Buddhist vision, is of men and women, all of us have the potential to become much more than we can even imagine. We have potential beyond our wildest dreams to be much more than we reckon. We have a reflection of the infinite in us, essentially. We have a longing for the infinite. And one of the problems is when this gets short-circuited or stuck onto things that are so finite. Yeah? I mean, this is classic in, again, in the issue of romance and lust. I've been joining a little bit of Shakespeare at the Globe in the summer, and you see it over and over again, these characters, these human characters in the comedies becoming completely falling in love and getting intoxicated, completely excited. The language flies off the handle, completely tremendous language, cosmic language, and then it kind of gets whoom, crashes into a poor mortal creature, a poor unsuspecting girl or a boy, and then all kinds of calamity ensue, right? That's the source of all the comedies. But I really noticed how he really gets this aspect of desires, huge power, huge energy released, which really seems to me to be, and Buddhism would sort of agree, is a longing for something much bigger, much more, a longing for the infinite that gets stuck onto something finite. And that's when you get that tension, that's another point where trouble then comes. And it reminded me of a quote by my root guru, the founder, teacher of this order. He said, I can't quote verbatim, but something to the effect of all worldly desire, worldly being unenlightened desire, the kind of desire that we have in our state of mind, my state of mind, your state of mind, is really a hankering in the dark for enlightenment itself. All unenlightened desire, all worldly desire, is really a hankering in the dark for enlightenment itself. Yeah. Anyway, maybe I'll just leave it at that. So, so I'll pause there. So I said quite a lot, actually. I always get carried away. Anything, maybe just give a chance to people to comment or ask questions at this point about anything I've said to do with anything, desire or issues of desire, Buddhist attitude to desire. Completely clear. Yes. Yeah.
What about the desire for meaning?
Yes.
People search for meaning. There is a famous book about it.
Yeah.
People sometimes needs an objective or something that gives them purpose.
Yeah.
And regardless to what the purpose is,
Yeah.
they need something to drive them forward.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Some kind of meaning.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Completely. Yeah. I mean, I completely agree and resonate. Yeah, I think it's a really important observation. Sometimes, I know sometimes people hear, sometimes when we talk about, at the Buddhist Center at least, when we talk about the goal, or we talk about enlightenment, people feel a bit like, wow, what's that? What is that really to do with anything? You can't really have a goal. It's just about being here and now. This is all there is. But I think that attitude doesn't see the fact that we do need something to move towards. We all have goals. We've got goals all the time. I mean, you've come here today with some goal in mind. You may not be particularly aware of it, but we all have goals. We're all moving towards something. And in a way, what Buddhism's trying to do is make that goal huge, like bigger than we can even imagine. A goal that actually is useful and meaningful to work towards. What that meaning exactly is quite hard to say. You could say it's not. You might even. It's very hard to describe. Maybe it's even impossible to quite put into words. But I certainly know what you. Often it's a sense, isn't it? Often it's a sense of meaningfulness. Things feel meaningful. It's almost like a state. It's almost like a state of mind rather than a particular explicit meaning. Like my friend in the gallery, for instance, when he broke down in tears, it was a tremendously meaningful experience for him in the beauty. But if I was to say to him, what did it mean? I don't think he would have said anything. I don't think he would have been able to say anything. Yet, it was manifestly a meaningful experience. Maybe akin to beauty, insofar as when things are truly beautiful, you can't sort of exactly say why. You can't sort of explain it. But it's almost like a shimmering sense. If you're looking at a beautiful sky or a beautiful landscape, and you go, "Oh, isn't that beautiful?" and your company says, "Why?" It's like, you kind of get it or you don't really. A bit like that. Sometimes it's a bit like that with meaning, a sense of meaning. But yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree that without meaning, it's a cold and dark life, really.
So how would you seek meaning in Buddhism?
Well, in a way, I mean, I think in a sense, the whole of Buddhism, the whole of the project, in a way, is a path of trying to discover meaning, discover deeper meaning in life, which is there to be uncovered, and to bring one's life more and more in line with that sense of things being meaningful and adding up to something, leading somewhere. Say that slightly in inverted commas, not necessarily literally somewhere, but as if things are going places. There is a journey. Yes.
I was just going to say that if Buddhism sort of advocates freeing the mind of desire, then wouldn't it be about sort of handing oneself over and kind of accepting ignorance and not wanting meaning, not sort of being receptive to not knowing, like sort of paradox where ignorance is knowledge.
Yeah. I think where a sense.
Seeking anything as such, surely should be kind of saying, I don't know what meaning is, but I can accept that.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredibly healthy perspective of realizing unknowing or not knowing things necessarily, or being able to explain things. I think what I get from what you're saying is the importance of the open mind of realizing one's own ignorance to actually what's going on, who we are, where things are going, what it's all about. Absolutely important. That's a very meaningful state of mind to dwell in. One of the problems is that it's quite easy to say. I don't know. It's quite easy to think, recognize one's ignorance, but actually, when I look at how I actually go on, how I go on with my behaviour, I'm not acting out of my ignorance. I'm not acting out. I sort of go on like I do know. I go on like I do know where I'm going and what things do, what this means, what they mean, etc. So it's actually quite hard to really live from a place of unknowing and keep realising that. In a way, that's one of the things we do when we sit down to meditate, is we're trying to open our minds in such a way where we can really learn, where we can really be receptive. I don't know what my consciousness is. I don't know what I'm doing exactly. That more open dimension of being, receptive dimension of being, finds its way to something more fruitful.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the unknown is like finding you kind of crave some sort of sureties. Much easier said than done to sort of accept maybe that you so much time as well.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to rectify desire and beauty. Beauty, there's a kind of stillness and expansiveness, and we're taken to like the middle of the sky and landscape, and you're like losing stuff.
Yeah.
Desire, you're kind of like brought into yourself and more focused, and there's energy there to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So it's trying to, can you hold both of them in your mind at one time? Are they compatible at all? And one seems to lead towards the other. Or is there some kind of fusion at some level along that kind of journey?
Well, I think probably in the experience of beauty, one is moved beyond, right? One is moved out of sort of tight desire. So, like, you know, with a moon, say, when one can really look at the moon fully, when one sees the moon as it in all its beauty, which doesn't happen that much actually. Often we see the moon, it's like, oh yeah, the moon. I've heard that's beautiful. But when one really sees it, it is like, ugh. You know, what one gets. You know, that sort of visceral response of the heart, kind of going, and the desire seems to change, doesn't it? The emotion changes, it moves, and it changes something else. But it does often feel like something's moving or something is happening. So I don't exactly know what that is. It's not as if like it's not as if it feels like it's maybe changed or something, or sublimated. Maybe you could say. I don't know. It's a strange thing though, actually, when one's gripped in a moment of beauty, where it goes. But certainly, the sense of separateness breaks down. The sense of what you're looking at and you starts to get a bit funky, starts to go thin. It's much more fluid, and that's often, you know, that's maybe that's a characteristic of beauty, of being fully engaged with something like that. Yeah, and it's so satisfying, right? So satisfying. Nourishing, absolutely nourishing. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And those are those peak moments, really telling us something about our nature, and urging us on to. Well, I think they're urging us on to discover that more. So easy to forget them. So easy to forget those, that we can live in that place. It's not an accident. We don't need to just wait for it to. We don't need to, wait for it to accidentally occur. There are. You can live from that place. You can lead to that place and live more from it, and it's not limited. Okay. Any final burning thoughts? All right, maybe we'll leave it there then. Anyway, thanks for. Very nice to see you all. Nice to talk a little bit. Far from comprehensive, but I hope it stimulated some thoughts about our attitudes and experience of desiring. And do enjoy the rest of the day. I'm not sure. I think the next there'll be another talk in here. There'll be another talk at 1. I think it's on what do we do, looking at more at how we live and our behaviour. And there's also meditation, taster session starting at 1:15. Anyway, very nice to see you, and have a nice Sunday.